So, what do our children learn from us? Now, this is one that I find I could talk about forever. And I find this comes up in conversation absolutely all the time with my clients, with my friends. And it's something that I just feel really strongly about because I want to be an excellent role model to my children. And sometimes I'm not. And that's the God's honest truth. And often we're not. And it's just about being able to have that insight, to be able to understand the messages that our children are receiving, exactly like the messages that we received as children when we were growing up. And as I said, I mean, in terms of my client work, these stories come up over and over and over again. And often the point that my clients get in touch with me is when they realise the impact that their own behaviour is having on their children. Not all the time, but quite often. But I'm going to, I want to try and keep this one quite light because this can be quite a heavy subject. And obviously for so many layers of the onion, it can be really, really complex. But I'm just thinking about it in terms today of what we expect from our children. And this is just such a great one because the kids have all gone back to school now. We're all back into that glorious school routine, for better or for worse. And I think about often about what we expect from our children. So what do we expect from our children in terms of how we expect them to communicate, whether we expect them to always do what they're asked, whether we expect them to never shout or never feel angry, how we see them relating to their peers and playing with their peers and managing conflict with their peers or managing conflict within the home, and how do they demonstrate love and how do they seek affection and how do they manage rejection and I could just go on forever. How do they manage when they're asked not to do something or they're told not to do something or they're told off for doing something? There's consequences for doing something that they did do or they didn't do. Blah, 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 blah. Like the list goes on and on and on and on. And these are all these wonderful expectations that we put on our kids all the time. And then I think about, well, what do we do as adults? What do we role model as adults? And I just have to just take a moment and laugh because I think there's going to be there was a lot of wine drinking for a lot of people over lockdown. And I'm just thinking about all those memes that go up on Facebook of like, what did you learn, Johnny, over lockdown? It's like mummy drinks too much wine and daddy swears a lot, or something stupid like that. But I'm thinking like seriously in terms of what do they learn from us in terms of whether or not we like ourselves, how we talk to ourselves, how we talk to our partners, how we talk to our friends, how we demonstrate love to our partners and our friends and to ourselves, and to them, and how do we resolve conflict, and how do we communicate, and all of these things around, like especially, so just conversation just came into my head of a conversation I had with a friend years ago, and she's got two boys and I've got two girls, and I was talking about feeling overweight and needing to get fit, and I was saying to her like how I have to be really, really, really careful. Maybe I only had Amelie at the time. I think maybe I only had Amelie at the time. How I want to be really careful not to like let all of that bullshit rub off on her being like 3, let's say at the time, or must have had Jasmine then. And like that conversation of like, wow, what a heavy load it is when we're all, well, most of us anyway, don't really like what we see in the mirror, And then we've got to protect our children from ever having those feelings about themselves. And this is what I mean. It's just like, it can be so complicated, let alone before we get into how do we communicate with our partner? How do we, are we always talking respectfully to each other? Do we sometimes lose our shit for no reason whatsoever? How do we resolve that conflict? What about conflict within friendship groups or with other family members? And these little sponges, they take it all in. They're watching, they're absorbing, they're listening, they're feeling like my eldest daughter's such an empath. She feels everything so much energetically. And that's, I mean, as I say, I could happily talk. I really want to try and keep these videos short because I don't know whether or not people listen to them all the way to the end or just think I end up waffling madly, which I do sometimes. But just think about it. Just think about how you represent yourself, how you represent your self-worth and your self-esteem, and how you represent commitment and love in a long-term relationship, and how you represent family life, and how to resolve conflict, and that you can still love somebody even if you're not getting on with them, and all of that kind of stuff, and how ultimately you need to love yourself. Think about that, and then think about whether or not that matches or really mismatches what we collectively, individually expect from our children. Because I'm almost certain that the overwhelming majority of you will agree, like me, that we expect a lot from our children that we don't always model ourselves. So there you go. I hope that was helpful. If you want to get in touch, if you want to talk to me about any of the work that I do, then please private message me and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. Bye bye.